They sat me down like I was some kind of child. My oldest, Mark, cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a eulogy. "Mom," he said, all slow and soft. "We've been talking. We think it's time to sell the house. My house. The house their father and I built with our own hands, brick by brick. The house where I raised them, nursed their fevers, cooked their favorite meals, patched their broken hearts. The house where their father died." I blinked at them, sitting across from me in the living room like a board of cold-hearted executives. Mark, the self-important businessman. Lisa, my only daughter, all fake smiles and soft manipulations. And Tom, the youngest, who wouldn't even look me in the eye. I'd always thought he was the sensitive one. Guess I was wrong. They'd rehearsed it. That much was clear. Mark led the pitch, Lisa added soft reassurances, and Tom chimed in only when necessary. "It's too much for you now," Lisa said. "You shouldn't have to take care of this big old place. And with the market the way it is, you'd get top dollar," Mark added, nodding like I was some clueless retiree they had to guide through a decision. I knew what they were really saying. They wanted the money. Not for me. No, for them. I felt something deep inside me snap, not loudly, not with drama, but like a quiet thread pulling taut. I had given them everything. Everything. After their father passed, I worked 2 jobs to keep the house running. I skipped vacations, sold my jewelry, drained my retirement savings to put them through college. I was there when they needed me, every time. And now, when I was finally catching my breath, they wanted to cash me out like an old investment. I looked around the room, my eyes scanning the walls they had drawn on as toddlers. The staircase, where Mark broke his arm pretending to be a superhero. The kitchen where Lisa burned her first batch of cookies. This house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was my life. My memories. Where would I go? I asked them. Lisa smiled that patronizing smile that always made my skin crawl. "There's a beautiful senior living community just outside town. It's got everything, gardens, activities, even a shuttle bus. A retirement home, like I was being shelved." I sat back, silent, and they mistook that silence for agreement. Mark actually smiled, as if the deal was already done. "We've already spoken to a realtor," he said. "They're ready to list it next month if you're okay with it." Already spoken to a realtor? That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a conversation. It was a decision. One they had made without me. They had planned it behind my back, assuming I'd just go along with it, that I'd be grateful. I kept my face calm, even as the betrayal roared inside me like a wildfire. I nodded, murmured something non-committal, and stood up. "I need some air," I said, and walked out to the backyard. The minute the door closed behind me, I exhaled sharply. The truth hit me hard. My own children, my flesh and blood, were trying to take from me the one thing I had left, the one thing that still made me feel close to their father, to the life we built. They thought I was old, powerless, alone. They were wrong. I wasn't going to fight them head on. No screaming matches, no guilt trips. That wasn't my style. I had other plans. Plans they'd never see coming. And by the time I was done, they'd wish they'd never underestimated me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my mind racing with everything they had said and everything they hadn't. They were so casual about it, like selling my home was just a matter of paperwork. As if I were a burden, as if I had nothing left to contribute. I replayed every word, every smug glance, and that self-satisfied nod Mark gave when he said the realtor was ready. They weren't asking. They were telling. I went down to the kitchen, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at the table where I used to help them with homework. I remembered how Lisa used to curl up next to me with her spelling lists, how Mark used to beg me to proofread his essays, how Tom would sneak cookies when he thought I wasn't looking. Where had those children gone? I pulled out my tablet and opened Lisa's Facebook. Her feed was all yoga poses, brunch photos, and inspirational quotes, but 2 weeks back there it was. So excited for the new investment opportunity coming our way. More to come soon. With a photo of her and her boyfriend standing in front of a modern condo development sign. Then I checked Mark's LinkedIn. He'd just posted about leveraging equity for generational wealth. And Tom? His Venmo history told me plenty. Monthly payments to some fancy guitar teacher and regular charges from a bar downtown. That's when I saw the pattern. It wasn't about me being too old to handle the house. It was about what they wanted from it. The money. They saw the house as a check waiting to be cashed. My years of hard work, my memories, didn't matter. They had plans for my house, and none of them included me. The next day, I drove into town and stopped by the office of Charles Peterman, our family attorney. He'd handled everything for us: wills, the mortgage, the deed. He was practically a family friend. When I walked in, he gave me that familiar warm smile. "Margaret," he said, standing to greet me. "What brings you in?" I sat across from him, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. How do you explain that your own children are plotting to push you out of your home? "I think my kids are planning to sell my house," I said finally. "And I think they've already found a buyer." He blinked. "Do they have power of attorney?" "No," I said. "But they're treating it like I've already signed off. They're pressuring me. They've gone behind my back." He nodded slowly. "Well, they can't do anything legally without your consent. But they can certainly make things unpleasant." "Exactly," I said. "They think I'm weak, that I'll just roll over and go." Charles leaned back in his chair. "Do you want to fight this?" I didn't hesitate. "I want to do more than fight it. I want them to understand exactly who they're dealing with." He chuckled. "I've always said you had more fire than most women half your age." "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve," I said, "but I need to know my options." He pulled out a notepad and started writing. "Let's start with what's in. Your name and what kind of protections we can put in place. Then we'll talk about what kind of paper trail they've left behind." We spent the next hour going over documents, titles, and old estate planning paperwork. Turns out the house was fully in my name. After my husband passed, we never updated anything else. No shared ownership, no automatic transfer rights. I wasn't just the homeowner, I was the sole legal owner, and that gave me power. Real power. As I drove home, I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. If they thought they were going to manipulate me out of my own home, they had another thing coming. I wasn't going to lose this house. Not to anyone. Especially not to my own ungrateful children. The next week was a blur of painful clarity. I started to see it all differently. My relationship with my kids, the slow erosion of respect, the quiet dismissals I had chalked up to busy lives. They weren't just trying to sell the house. They were trying to write me off. Put me away. Neatly, quietly. Like I was a loose end they needed to tie up. I noticed how they talked to me now. Like I was already halfway gone. Mark called once to say, "Mom, let's not drag this out. It's just a house." Just a house. As if he hadn't grown up under that roof. As if it wasn't his father's dying wish to keep it in the family. Lisa texted me listings from retirement. Communities. "This one has a walking club and indoor pool," she said, like she was booking me a vacation instead of pushing me out of the life I built. And Tom? He didn't say much. But silence can be loud. He hadn't called once since that meeting, not even to ask how I was doing. It stung. God, it stung. I had always believed family came first. That if you poured enough love into your children, they'd return it someday. Maybe not in money or favors, but in loyalty, in care. But this wasn't care. This was abandonment disguised as concern. I looked around my house with new eyes. Every crack in the wall, every creaky floorboard, they all told stories. My stories, our stories. This place wasn't a financial asset. It was my life's work. And it wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about dignity. It was about the years I'd spent sacrificing so they could have more. Skipping dinners so Mark could go on that field trip. Working weekends so Lisa could have dance lessons. taking on extra shifts after their father died so Tom could keep his spot at that fancy school. I gave them everything, and in return, they gave me deadlines, ultimatums. I knew what would happen if they got their way. I'd end up in some sterile little apartment, surrounded by strangers, treated like a delicate piece of furniture, patted on the head, given soft food and scheduled activities. And they'd visit out of obligation, if at all. Maybe once a month, maybe less. That wasn't living. That was waiting to die. And I wasn't done living. I thought about the friends I knew, women like me. Some had already been shuffled off to the edges of their families' lives. They were lonely, forgotten, reduced to a phone call on Mother's Day and the occasional holiday dinner. No one tells you how invisible you become once your children decide you're no longer useful, but I wasn't going to be one of them. They thought I was clinging to the past, but I was fighting for my future, for my right to choose what comes next, for the promise I made to myself after my husband passed, that I wouldn't let anyone, not even the people I loved most, diminish me. That's when I knew the stakes. This wasn't about real estate. This was a battle for my independence. And the more I dug into what they were doing behind my back, the secret realtor meetings, the financial documents they were quietly pulling, the phone calls to get things in motion, the more I realized they weren't just trying to help, they were plotting. They thought I was too naive to notice, too soft to stop them. They forgot where I came from, what I had survived. They forgot that I'd buried a husband, raised 3 children, and built a life from scratch when we had nothing but a crumbling starter home and secondhand furniture. I didn't survive all that to be pushed aside like a worn-out coat. This mattered because I matter, and I wasn't done fighting. If they wanted a war, they had just declared it. And I was ready. They thought they had me boxed in, that I'd either cave or quietly disappear. But I wasn't some feeble old woman waiting for permission to live. I was angry, focused, and more importantly, ready. The first part of my plan started with information. People always underestimate the quiet observer. They assume silence means confusion, not calculation. But I had watched my kids long enough to know how they operated. They made decisions quickly, didn't think long-term, and they rarely, if ever, anticipated consequences. So I decided to give them exactly what they wanted, for now. I called Mark the next morning. "I've been thinking," I said, using my softest voice, the one I used when they were little and had scraped knees. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to let go of the house." There was a pause, just long enough to catch him off guard. "That's great, Mom. That's really great. I'm glad you're seeing the bigger picture." "Oh, I saw the picture. I just wasn't standing where he thought I was." "I'd like to meet the realtor," I continued, "before anything's final, just to feel comfortable." He agreed, of course, too easily. He thought I was rolling over. What he didn't realize was that I was getting closer to the source. I needed names, documents, signatures, things they would have kept hidden if I pushed too hard, but now they thought they were in control. The realtor, a smug young woman named Jenna, came to the house with glossy pamphlets and a big smile. "This place is going to fly off the market," she said, walking through my kitchen like she already owned it too. She started taking notes, snapping photos with her phone, talking about open concepts and modern upgrades. I stood quietly beside her, nodding. I offered her a cup of tea. While she waited, I excused myself to the office and made copies of the initial listing paperwork she'd laid out on the table. They'd already done a lot behind my back, but now I had evidence. Next, I reached out to Charles again. I asked him about setting up a trust, not just any trust, but one with a clause that locked the house from being sold without my direct and personal approval, even after death. If my children wanted to play games with my assets, I was going to make the rules very clear. "I want to keep the house in my name," I told him. "But if anything happens to me, I want it going somewhere else." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean, not to your children?" "That's right," I said. "I want to donate it to a women's shelter, turn it into something that actually helps people. He didn't argue. He just nodded and got to work. The paperwork would take a week to finalize. That gave me time for the second part of my plan. Confrontation. Not explosive, not dramatic. Controlled. I invited the kids over for dinner, just like old times. Homemade lasagna, fresh bread, a bottle of red. I laid it all out like nothing was wrong. I even smiled as I passed the plates. We ate, we chatted, and then I dropped the first stone. "So," I said, "I met your realtor. She's very confident we'll get a great price." They all brightened, thinking I was finally on board. Mark pulled out a folder. Lisa mentioned touring condos again, and that's when I said it. "But I've decided not to sell." The silence was instant. "What?" Mark asked, already frowning. "I've changed my mind," I said calmly. "And I've put the house into a trust. You'll find that out soon enough. I just thought you should hear it from me first." Lisa looked stunned. Tom looked guilty. Mark looked furious. "But we already—" "I know," I said, holding his gaze. "That's the problem." I stood, cleared my plate, and took it to the sink like it was just another Tuesday. They weren't in control anymore. I was, and that was only the beginning. The silence that followed that dinner was golden. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive email from Lisa, which was saying something. I knew they were scrambling, wondering how much I knew, how much control I really had. I didn't care. Because while they were panicking, I was preparing. So, first thing I did was lock down every financial document I had. I went through my filing cabinet and pulled out old bank statements, insurance policies, the deed to the house, anything they could potentially try to manipulate. I bought a fireproof safe and moved everything into it. Digital copies were uploaded to a cloud drive only I could access, protected with two-factor authentication. Next, I visited the local bank where my accounts were held. I sat down with the branch manager and changed all my account permissions. None of my children would be able to access anything, not without my signature and a phone call verification. I removed Lisa's name from the emergency access I had foolishly added years ago when she said, "Just in case something happens to you." Not anymore. Then I called Charles again. "I want to update my will," I said, "and I want it notarized and filed, immediately." We rewrote everything. The house was no longer willed to the kids. It was set to transfer directly to the non-profit I'd selected, one that supported older women who'd been displaced or abandoned by their families. I added a clause that explicitly stated the children had no authority to contest the will without legal repercussions. "And if they try?" I asked. "They'll be facing a very public court battle," Charles said. "And they'll lose. Everything." Good. But I didn't stop there. I started writing everything down. Dates, conversations, the dinner, what the realtor said, the documents I'd seen. I wanted a trail, something clear and concrete. If they ever tried to gaslight me, I'd have proof. Then, I called Jenna, the realtor. "Hi, Jenna. Just wanted to follow up," I said pleasantly. "Oh, yes, Margaret. We were just about to send over some forms." "There's no need," I cut in. "I won't be moving forward. In fact, I'd appreciate it if you destroyed any materials related to this listing. As the sole property owner, I never gave consent to proceed." She paused, then got defensive. "I was under the impression—" "I'm sure you were," I said. "But let me be very clear. If anything related to this house appears on any listing site, I will consider it unauthorized and take legal action. You'll be hearing from my attorney if it happens again." Click. That door slammed shut. Now, I was free to enjoy my life. Again. But I didn't just want peace. I wanted to rebuild. Reclaim the parts of me I had put aside for the sake of being mom. So I signed up for a painting class at the community center. I joined a book club. I reconnected with an old friend who had moved back to town. I filled my days with things that made me feel alive, not just useful. And slowly, I started to realize something. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't waiting for their apology. I wasn't holding my breath for a change of heart. I was done chasing affection from people who saw me as a transaction. They thought I wouldn't fight back because I loved them. But real love doesn't mean surrender. It means respect. And respect was something they'd lost the moment they tried to take what was mine without asking. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. All I had to do was act. And I did. Quietly. Confidently. With every ounce of strength they'd underestimated. I had my home. I had my autonomy. And most importantly, I had myself. A month passed before I heard from any of them. It was Mark, of course, the self-appointed leader of the group. He showed up on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced, holding a half-hearted smile and a forced tone of warmth. "Hey, Mom. Thought I'd stop by, talk things through." I didn't flinch. "Come in." He sat at the dining table, where I'd once served birthday cakes and helped him with school projects. Funny how things change. He glanced around the room like it was already someone else's property. "I think things got out of hand," he started. "We were just worried about you. The house is a lot to manage. It's not personal." "Isn't it?" I asked, folding my hands. "Because it felt pretty personal when you started the paperwork behind my back. When you tried to make decisions for me. When none of you asked what I wanted." He looked caught, but not sorry. "We didn't mean to make you feel excluded. We just thought you'd agree it was time." "No, Mark," I said, calmly but firmly. "You thought I wouldn't stop you. You assumed that because I'm older, I must be confused, or weak, or ready to be put away somewhere and forgotten." He had the nerve to sigh, as if he was the one carrying the weight. "Look, we're trying to do the right thing here." "No, you were trying to do what was easiest for you," I snapped. "And you didn't care who got hurt in the process." I got up and brought over the trust paperwork. I placed it on the table, letting him read the bolded text that stated, in no uncertain terms, that the house was no longer his to inherit, and never would be. "This is legally binding," I said. "You and your siblings have no claim to this house now. After I'm gone, it will become a shelter. A place where women who've been discarded by their families can rebuild their lives." His face turned red. "You're punishing us?" "No. I'm protecting myself. From people I thought I could trust." He didn't say much after that. Just stared at the papers like they'd betrayed him too. "I gave you everything, Mark," I said quietly. "My time, my love, my sacrifices. And when I needed respect, you offered me paperwork and pity." He stood up, face tight. "You'll regret this, Mom. One day." "No, Mark. One day you will." And with that, he left. I didn't cry. I didn't waver. I locked the door behind him and took a deep breath. The house felt different now. Lighter. Not because it had changed, but because I had taken it back. Not just the deed. The meaning of it. The control. Over the next few weeks, the silence from the kids continued. Lisa tried calling once, but I let it go to voicemail. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, and that she hoped someday we could talk. Maybe someday we will. Maybe not. I wasn't living in bitterness. I was living in clarity. For so long, I had thought being a good mother meant saying yes, being agreeable, putting myself second. But it doesn't. Sometimes it means saying no, drawing the line. Refusing to let your children bulldoze over your dignity just because they think they can. The final lesson I gave them wasn't in a lecture, it was in action. And maybe, years from now, when they're older and wondering how it all unraveled, they'll look back and realize I didn't push them away. They left me no choice. Now my days are peaceful. I wake up when I want. I paint, I read, I laugh. The house is full of light again, not tension. And soon, when my time comes, it'll go on to help other women who deserve a second chance at life. That's a legacy worth leaving. As for my children, karma's already done its job, and I, finally, have peace.